Okay.
If it gets
Here
to
we
it.
come.
I ain't worried about him. I got you.
I'm here, man. Saving the day.
That's what's up.
Oh, I knew you were covered. I tried to get Louis stuff. I said, no, Louis, I said, dude, guess what? Because he can Zoom us. He don't have to come here.
Yeah.
What am I going to talk about? I said, you always have something to talk about.
Oh.
He's like, yeah, well, you know. I said, well, you always got an opinion.
Don't be afraid to share it now.
The Voice 17104.com. This is Zanetta Wingfield, and you're listening to The Voice 17104.com. The Voice 17104.com.
Hello and welcome. I'd like to invite you to just enjoy the experience that we're about to encounter. I'd like to introduce to you a man of a very humble beginning, a man that was able to overcome the horrific misclassification of special education. A caring man, a man that will encourage you because he's been there and done that. And I'd like to encourage you to keep an open mind and be empowered to change your life. I'd like to present to you a man of men, Richard. Richard Utley.
Good evening, and welcome to another Did You Know? Well, I have an interesting program tonight. But before I get there, as you know, I usually talk about certain things. And as I've always said to you, it's important. So those of you, even though the election won't be until November, I want to remind you that you need to make sure that you register to vote. Also, I want to say to you that I told you before, we need to keep our eye on what's going on in the House and the Senate and what's going on in the government, whether it's in Pennsylvania or some other state that you may live in. I think some of you may need to be aware that they're working on a bill over there down at the Capitol. It's a bill restricting unemployment benefits. It's clear to the Senate. It's clear to the Senate. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in the House. As you know, the Senate is Republican and the House is Democrat. But unemployment law specifies that workers are ineligible for benefits if they refuse an interview or be referred for a new job and do everything else that's unreasonable so that they won't hire you. So those of you who feel the need that you don't want to follow the rules, I'm just letting you know they're going to tighten up the rules. They're going to tighten up the screws. So they're saying if you don't show up or you try to come up with a reason so you don't get hired, it's going to affect your unemployment benefits. So these are things that I keep trying to explain to you that we need to stay on top of, and you need to be prepared for them. The other thing, voter ID is coming back up again, and as you know, the reason why is this unclaimed widespread voter fraud, and as I shared with you before, it's always been amusing to me that where they said that the fraud was, it seemed to be in the minority communities. So on one hand they say we don't vote, on the other hand they say we are not that sophisticated, but on the other hand they're saying, boy, we're pretty bright there, that we're able to figure out how that we're going to change the elections in the United States. But saying that to you, as I've shared earlier, that why do we keep fighting this voter ID? It's going to happen. So instead of taking all the energy that we have and keep trying to fight it so it don't happen, I think we need to take that energy and prepare people for it. Folks, it's going to happen. Whether you believe it or not, it's going to happen. Whether it's in this state or other states or... So what I'm just saying, instead of spending all this energy to keep saying, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen, it's going to happen. As you know, I like to plant seeds in your mind and get you to think about some things. So today I'm going to leave you with something that I thought was very interesting. But it's for you to answer. It's not for me to answer, but it's for you to think about. When we see let's make America great again policies, are they a detriment to the black community? I want you to answer that. I just want you to answer that. Is it progress or is it turning back the clock? I want you to think about that. I mean, think about voting, health care, and economic opportunities. Because I think that's very important. Because as I've said to you before, if we don't invest in our own interest, then shame on us. I've also said that I've always got upset because we need to look out for our community. Because if we don't look out for our community, who else is going to look out for our community? So I just want you to think about that. I just want you to embrace policies that promote justice, equality, and inclusion for all. Now, does that do that? You think about it. I believe that all citizens should experience the full potential of America. So I got you now thinking about is make America great again. The policies, does it determine, is it detriment, really? Does it determine certain things in the black community? Is it a detriment to the black community? And I want you to think about that. And as I said, is it progress or is it turning the clock back? Because I think that's very important. I try to give you things that I think that you should look at and understand. And so today I'm going to give you one that I want you to think about. And when I tell you to think about it, I want you to think about this here. In 1949, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of J.D. Shelley. I want you to do some research to find out what that Supreme Court decision was about. And I'm willing to bet you half of you probably don't know what it's about, but I'll tell you this. It affected you. And it affected a lot of us. It may not have affected you personally, but it affected somebody you know, and it affected somebody as you were growing up. And I can tell you this, that Supreme Court back then affect us today. So I know what it is, but I want you to look it up. I don't feel that I should tell you because I want you to do your own research. Because I made a decision that everybody is scared about what history we know and what history we don't know. So I made up my mind what we need to do is that we need to teach our own history. We need to share everything, information about our families, our communities, our forefathers, our ancestors. And I think that if we do that, I think you will find that you will be proud of who you are. Because so long we've been fulfilled with so much negative. We ain't this, we ain't that, we ain't smart about doing this, and we're not smart about doing about that. And when you find out, you will be very shocked. You will find out that Africa may not be the way it has been projected to you. You will find out that we in America may not be projected as we were projected as. And I've always said the reason I have this program is because I think that we need to create our own narrative. I think we need to paint our own picture. And I think that we need to tell our own story. So with that, tonight, I'm fortunate to have a young man. We're friends, and I've known him a long time. And his name is Willie Slade. And Willie Slade, I brought him on because I want him to tell you his journey. He's over at the Steelton-Highspire School District as assistant to the superintendent. But before we get there, I want him to tell you who he is and why he went from point A to point B. Willie, please.
Thanks a lot. Great to be here with you. Like I said, my name is Willie Slade. I am born and raised in Steelton, Pennsylvania. I lived in the area my entire life. 1988, proud graduate of Steelton-Highspire High School. At that time, at Steel High, I was on the football team. Obviously, everybody has to play football at Steel High. Also played baseball. Went to college, went to Pennsylvania State University. Graduated there with a degree in administration of justice, and that led to a different journey than education. I actually went into law enforcement as a probation officer, juvenile probation, and during that time I became a school-based probation officer, and I was one of the first school-based probation officers in Dauphin County. And we started out at the old Harrisburg Middle School, off the bypass when it was Roland and Scott. And from there, I moved down to Steele High as a probation officer, and that's kind of where I started my journey to education.
What made you want to go from juvenile justice and into the judicial system to education?
Well, it's weird because when I got there, because it was only a few years after I graduated college, and so a lot of my former teachers were still there. And one of my former teachers was now the guy who was my principal when I graduated high school, was the assistant superintendent of the same role I'm in now. And he saw that I got into coaching. I started helping out the football team, started doing little different things for the school in my off time. And he just said, "No, you're doing all this for the school. Why don't you get into teaching and work for the school? It would be a lot easier if you're working school hours, you're working with all the kids instead of just kids that are on probation." And I resisted for a couple of years, like, Don, because I never thought about becoming a teacher or getting into education. But the more I thought about it and the more I was at the school, it started to get really interested in it. And so I went back to school, went to Wilson College, and got my social studies certification. And next thing you know, I was teaching. I was the teacher, and I started teaching. And a few years, I decided to go back and get my master's degree in education. And during that same period, got my principal cert. And about a year or so after that, I became an assistant principal, and then was in that position for several years. And then I became principal at Steele High, which was something I never thought it would ever happen. Going to school there, the last thing I was ever thinking about that I would be principal. So.
Okay, let me ask you this here. Let's go back to your other background. I want to talk about the education part, but let's go back to the other. What is your vision? The fact that you were probation officer with juveniles. What is your perception of where we are now with juveniles and some of the things that we need to be aware of and some of the things that we should do?
Well, I think we at times, even when I was working there, and this was many years ago, but even today, I think we spend a lot of time trying to figure out what to do after the fact, after the kids are already getting in trouble. And we, in my opinion, we need to do more prevention. And by what I mean is we need to be putting more focus on families and on children when they're young, and how do we help these young kids and these young families, because 9 times out of 10 when you see a student or a child that's getting in trouble, it's because it's family issues. And it's parents it's usually young parents that don't really know how to be parents yet, and they don't know how to control their children, and they're trying to be more friends than they are trying to be parents. And they allow the kids to do all the things that they shouldn't do, but it's not so much that they want to allow it, they just don't know. They don't have the training to be a parent. They just became a parent. And I think we need to put more energy on helping young people know how to be a parent, put more focus into programs that deal with young kids. Education is super important, especially at the elementary age. We need to have more pre-K programs, getting kids prepared to come to kindergarten, especially in the low socioeconomic areas. These kids aren't ready when they get to kindergarten. They're not getting the same type of attention that and where I'm looking for is access to things that they need prior to coming to school. So when they come to school, they're already behind. Mm-hmm. And kids tend to be disruptive when they can't read. And so making sure our kids are ready and learning how to read early, to me, is if you want to stop juvenile crime, that's the way to do it.
So you say that we need to do more in terms of teaching people to be parents.
Mm-hmm.
What else do we need to do to give our kids hope? Because I was looking at something the other day, and I come to find out that a lot of these kids have behavior problems, amazing to me, in third and
Mm-hmm.
fourth grade.
Yeah. It's a lot of, like I said, at the younger age, kids are they're coming to school and they're not prepared. They don't know how to sit in the classroom, because they're so, especially now, because technology, a lot of kids are looking at a phone before they can read, and they're sitting in front of a phone, or sitting in front of a tablet, or sitting in front of a computer. When I was younger, it was always, well, you don't sit in front of the TV. Well, these kids have it in their hands, and they're getting the stuff, and they're not, and so the parents, those parents aren't making these kids, hey, I want you to sit down and read a book. I want you to learn how to read. I want you to learn how to use numbers. I want you to learn how to your addition, your subtraction, and instead they're on the phone. They can play them games on the phone. They can figure that out. But when it comes to school and it's time, okay, I need you to sit down for a half hour and focus in on this work, they can't do it, and that's because they're not prepared. And I know growing up, when I was real little, I was made to read. Like I didn't have a choice in the matter. Like, if you're going to read these some series of books, we're going to get you. You're going to read these books, and you had to do it. And I think we've gotten away from that as a society, and especially I think in the black community. I think we've gotten away from, and also I think we've gotten away from emphasizing education, making it important.
So you've said that we need to do a better job in preparing the parent, and do you also feel that we need to encourage young people? And the reason I say that, because sometimes when I talk to young people, they say that they don't care if they die at 13. They don't care if they die at 14. And it kind of bothers me, because, when I was growing up, we was thinking about sports. So why do you think that is?
I think it is about people encouraging these kids to do positive things, and being in their lives, and showing them that there's more to life than what they think it is, and helping them get out to see things. Like our kids, at a young age, like they see Harrisburg, they see Steelton, but they don't see the world. They don't know that there's more out there, and they get into this thing where there's nothing. Like, why should I care? I'm just gonna be sitting on this corner. I'm gonna be standing here. I'm not going anywhere. And you got to really show them that there's more to life than just their current surroundings. And we really need to, encourage these kids to. And I think a lot of that goes back to learn more about not just themselves but their surroundings. But and let them know that there's so much out there for you to do, that you can become, and you don't have to be just here. And you're not just you're more than what you think you are. You got to give them that inspiration that you can make it from here. Like I tell kids all the time, like I grew up in Steelton, and I did well. You can do well growing up in Steelton. Just because you're from here doesn't mean you can't do something. And just trying to encourage them, because unfortunately a lot of these kids at home don't see it.
They don't see it at all.
They don't see the success that they want to be. And so they only like, if you're living in a low socioeconomic area, and that's all you see is poverty, you don't know that you can make it. And I think sometimes we don't do enough to show these kids that you can do more than you think you can do. You're smarter than you think you are. You can do this. You can do this math equation. You can do this thing. You can go into business. You can build things. There's so many things out there you can do, but you got to show them those things that are out there. I'm really big on, like, it sounds so simple, but field trips, especially at the younger age, at kindergarten, first grade, getting kids out to see things that they wouldn't normally be able to see, to let them know that, hey, there's opportunities out there.
What do you think that the community should do in order to help our young people out?
That's a great question. I would love to see, I'm just thinking about my own hometown, but just everywhere. But I would just more support for kids as just kids, and not like you always see support for the sports team if they win, or an individual they do something spectacular, but just support for kids in general. Having things for kids to do, in the evening, having things to do for kids on the weekend that are positive. I think that's a community thing where you can have different types of organizations joining in to help kids. Like I know, like when I was growing up, we had youth baseball, youth football. We had a rec league that took us on trips and stuff and did things. We don't have that anymore. And I think kids, they get kind of put out to this. You got to find your own way and find something to do for yourself, and that's hard to do for young kids. And I think it's up to us as a community to try to find things and help kids do things.
Okay, you had talked sometimes about parents still being children themselves. How do you see us working with kids who need to be taught the value of life? And the reason I bring up the value of life is because I think when people see TV, I think when kids see TV, I think when they see pow pow and they're dead, and even they take it a step further, kids nowadays, it's very common to know that somebody got shot. It's very common to drive through the neighborhoods and see the balloons up.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, the fact that they see that, they don't value life because they just think that it's over and done. It bothers me because there was a shooting a couple days ago. There's always shootings.
Yeah, just down the street here.
Down the street here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get upset when I talk about black on black crime, and that we need to take some responsibility, that we need to help encourage our young people. And that I guess is not your job, and I'm going to go to the schools now. It's not your job to be the father, the mother, and everything else. But how do you see your role as an educator in terms of trying to encourage, form these young people to see the other side?
Yeah, I think it all starts with just trying to help them realize that they have value. That you have value as a person. You're important to us. We always try to make sure the kids know, hey, that you're important to us. That no matter what's going on out there, you have somebody here that cares about you. One thing about kids is they know if somebody cares or not. And so I think one thing you have to be honest and sincere and honest with them, let them know, hey, we're here, and then let them know that whatever you need us to do to help you, we're willing to do. And I know at ours, it's kind of different for us because we're a small school, so we get to know our kids really, really well because we only have so many kids in the district. So, but we really harp on that, trying to make it a family atmosphere, because some of our kids don't have that family atmosphere at home. Some of these kids come from some tough lives, some tough situations. So letting them know that you care goes a long way. But then showing them that, hey, there's so much opportunity out there if you just let us help you get there, and trying to find different ways to help them and find a different ways what they need. Like some kids, they may need some counseling. Some kids, they just may need to talk to someone at the school. They may just need to help get a job. I mean, every kid is different, and just trying to find what could help that individual kid. There's no cure-all for everyone. So you really gotta try to find that thing that helps that individual kid, and then really do that. But I think that the most important thing is just being honest and sincere with them, because if you try to fake your way through it, you're going to lose them. And I think a lot of times, a lot of programs, people that aren't in it for the right reasons, I think that's why you see a lot of things fail, because the kids see right through it, and it's like they don't care about us. They're here for this money, or they're here for that. So I think that the number one thing is making sure that you're sincere about what you're doing.
So okay, so you said that kids see so much violence, and so they, in some aspects, they see that as the norm. And you're saying it's very important that we start to look at kids from K on up.
Definitely. Even before that, really pre-K. I mean, you got to start working with them as young as you can possibly work with them, and try to prepare them and get them to understanding that there's another way, because it's amazing now how young some of these kids are, that, like you said, there's shootings and there's incidents happening, and in the age of some of these young kids involved, sometimes it's scary, and like, we really got to find a way to get kids early, and really just families all together.
I mean, I say that because, as you said, around the corner there was a shooting last week, but around that same corner there's been 2 or 3 shootings. So kids walk past, and no longer it's a norm to them.
Yeah.
And so, what do you see that we need to do? There's no question. I would admit to you, there's no question. And when I was growing up, it's a lot different now, because back then you had churches. You had a lot of community organizations that supported us. So do you think one of the things that we need to take a look is social responsibility in our communities to help young people out?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, the statement is true. It takes a village. I mean, it really does. And I think you got to have community involvement. You can't expect the schools. You can't expect the government. I mean, it really has to be the community that takes charge in trying to help its own. And you got to try to help your own, and figure out a way. How can we get involved, and how can we help these kids? How can we help these families? Because if you depend on others to do it, they don't have the incentive to help your community like you do living there. And so I think you really has to be the people that are there, and in our community as a whole, trying to figure out, hey, what can we do to help each other, and especially help our young people.
I mean, you said it earlier that one of the things we need to do is expose them to other things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very interesting thing, because, as you said, we need to give our kids value. And as I said earlier, schools just can't do it as well. Like you said, it has to be the community. But would you say that, as far as you're concerned, you think education is very important and we need much more of a commitment? But as I asked you a much more commitment, I'm going to ask you in terms of, there's not a lot of black folks that is into teaching, and why do you think that is?
I've thought about that, and that's a great question, and I think you kind of go back to what your experiences were growing up in school, and a lot of times for a lot of black youth, school's tough for them. So the last thing they're thinking about doing is returning to that profession. But I think that's part of it. I think the financial piece of it. I mean, just teachers don't get paid a lot compared to some other professions that you can go to college for and come out of college and get into. And it's not as glamorous as some other professions. So I think it's a difficult recruiting pitch when you're trying to recruit people to come in to be teachers, and especially in this day and age when you're like, well, I don't want to have to deal with these kids and do this and do that and work. They see how many hours teachers are working, and for not the pay that they should be receiving. So I think that kind of scares people away. But I think if they could understand the impact that they could have on some of these young people, I think that was one of my big things, was that I realized I could impact more kids as a teacher than I could as a probation officer, because I was only dealing with kids who had already gotten in trouble as a probation officer. But as an educator, as a teacher, I could work with kids and try to steer them off that path. So I think that's where I think a lot of people don't realize that the impact that you could have working with kids is unbelievable. And it's not even so much even just as a teacher, but just even if you're not a teacher and you don't want to be a teacher, you can volunteer and work and help in schools and help out on different things, and just be there or start programs. Like I know one of my good friends that I went to college with, he started a program. He's not a teacher, but he works with kids in the schools to his program. And so little things like that can also help.
So you said earlier that we need to let people know that education is very important from the very beginning,
Mhm.
and that we need to correct the myths and also understand that. And I see it because I read somewhere where a lot of kids, as you say, are disruptive because they don't have a strong academic background because they can't read. So they figure, since I can't read that or I didn't read that, I can just act up.
Yeah, it's a defense mechanism that kid will. And I was. It's funny because I was telling a story today in school today. I said, we have kids. You can take a kid out, say on a field trip, and oh wow, this behavior's awesome today. Why is he so good? Well, the kid doesn't have a behavior issue, but he gets back in school, and then he's in class, and he's disruptive because he doesn't want you to call on him because he can't do the work. And it's embarrassing, and they don't want to be embarrassed showing that they can't read as well as the other kids, or they can't do math as well as the other kids. So that's when you have kids, they'll be disruptive just to either stop the teacher from calling on them or to get kicked out of the class so they don't have to do the work. And I said that's how you can tell a lot of times when a kid has a learning issue, it's just because of when his behavior occurs. They can stay out of trouble in the cafeteria. They don't get in trouble, at after school activities. They don't get in trouble on field trip. Well, the kid doesn't have a behavior issue, but they're getting in trouble when it's time to learn. That's when you need to look at that. And a lot of times, some people miss that and they focus on the behavior and not the why of the behavior. So that's some of the things that we look at, as administrators and as principals, and you look at that. Okay, this kid is getting, this is why this kid is getting in trouble. It's how about we evaluate his reading level and see where he's reading at, or his math level, see that. Then we can probably get this kid some help. And you see, once you do that, the behavior stuff stops because now this kid is starting to be able to do what he couldn't do.
Okay, so of course, urban schools are always targeted in terms of what people perceive education. Even I went to an urban school. So how do we change the myth of that? And I say how you change the myth of it, because when people say, oh, I go to Steelton, or I go to Harrisburg, or I go here, how do we change the myth? Because one of the things, there are some really, really smart kids that go to those schools that will do well.
Do very well. I think the biggest thing that we can do is try to tell our own story louder than the people with the negative stuff say. Because it's impossible for us to control what other people say. They're going to say negative things no matter what we do, but we have to be able to share our story. We got to always share the positives of what our kids are doing. And not just about the things they expect from you. Like, they expect to hear the football team, they expect to hear the basketball, but we got to show them, hey, look at these kids that we have that are on the honor roll, that are going to college. Look at these kids here that are going into the military, that are doing well. These kids are doing, this and that, and try to show them, look, our kids can do everything that your kids can do, and they're doing it with less. They don't have the access to the same type of things that you guys have access to, and they're still performing well. They're still going to college and doing well, and graduating from college, going to grad school, becoming. If people knew how many people from our school has become, I'm talking about still high, that have become doctors and lawyers, but we don't promote it enough. But we'll find out, yeah, so-and-so, yeah, he's a doctor, or so-and-so, yeah, he just became a lawyer. It's like, well, why aren't we promoting that? Because no one ever thinks that comes from our school, but they always promote the negative. So one of the focuses we've been trying to do is, promote the positive.
Well, not only the negative, but the other issue is that usually, and especially in urban schools, we always promote sports.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about sports. They can tell you how many points that a kid can have. A parent can tell you how many points that kid had, but if you ask that parent what is that kid's GPA, he can't tell you, or she can't tell you. That bothers me.
Right, and that's the thing, and that's, like I said, that's what it comes back to, trying to make sure that you're promoting the right things and say, hey, we know we have a game tomorrow night, but you know what? Back to school night's tomorrow. It's next Tuesday, or STEM night is on next Thursday, or things like that, and promoting things other than just our athletic. We're proud of our athletics at Still High, that, but it has to be more, because at the end of the day, the chances of any of our kids becoming professional athletes is slim and none. But they can become a professional in another in another profession. They can become, like I said, they can become a lawyer, they can become a doctor, they can whatever, own a business, do things like that. So you gotta make sure that the academic piece is there, and that it's just that's more important really than anything else. Because at the end of the day, I don't really care how great an athlete you are. If you don't have the grades, you're not going to do anything after high school. And that's where you have to promote academics, and making sure that our kids know that. But also on the same thing, it's not just making sure that our kids understand it's the academic piece, but also there's things to do other than, you don't have to go to college. You can go to a trade school, you can go to a business school, you can do things like that as well. So just trying to get everything out there that is more than just sports. And I used to be an AD, so for me to say that, it's me.
Somebody writes, you can get a good education in any public school if you focus yourself on learning.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about that statement?
Oh, I agree with it 100%. I think if you want to get a good education, you can get one at any school, as long as, because there's teachers that are definitely, every school has teachers that are there dedicated to work with their students to focus on what they need, and if you have the right focus, you can do it. And I've seen it. Like I said, I've seen our kids from our little school, our little urban school, go on and do great things, and do very well in college, come out, do very well, in their chosen field. So I know it can be done. I did it. I mean, I'm like I said, I'm a Steele High graduate. I went to Steele High, and I was able to come and go to college and do well and do everything. And so, like I said, there's nothing stopping you if you really want to do it, and you're willing to take any help and support that's there for you. But you gotta be willing to do that. And you can't think that, because not everybody can just do it on your own. You gotta be able to take support and help if you need it. But you can be educated. I mean, I don't care if you're going to Steele High, you're going to Harrisburg, you're in Philly or in Pittsburgh or wherever. You can be successful if you choose to do the work.
So do you think that we need to do a better job of telling our story? Because
Mm-hmm.
public schools get a bad knock.
Definitely.
So you think we do better tell our story, and you think that we need to encourage, as you said earlier, encourage the student to say, hey, you can be anything you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I'm not on you, but I'm a product of it as well. Going to a public school. But I think that one of the things that we got to do is some kind of way, and I don't know what it is, that we got to get these kids to understand they're valuable, and not only they're valuable, but what they do in the long run will form them. I was reading somewhere where they look at tests to see how many kids is going to fail, or how many kids is not going to graduate from high school. So if they don't graduate from high school, what's their projection? The projection is probably going to be criminal.
Mm-hmm.
So we spend that kind of time to determine that, opposed to spending the time and the energy to support the public schools and do the kinds of things. Now, I do understand, because people stop me and tell me sometimes that times are not the way I was growing up, and kids are hungry now, and kids are this. But I from my understanding, I think that you try to deal with the hunger, you try to deal with those things, because there are kids that they have homeless, right?
Yeah, we're 100% free breakfast and free lunch, all our kids, so they have access to free breakfast and free lunch, every day or every school day. And then even in the summertime, we try to have different programs if we can find ways to do it, to help with that as well. Even like during COVID, we were delivering, like we had central locations throughout the community where we would take the lunches, so kids could still have food to eat. So that's very important, because it's very difficult. It's very difficult to learn when you're hungry. It's very difficult. So we try to make sure that our kids get that meal, at least 2 meals. We know definitely a day, with breakfast and lunch. Then a lot of times, even a lot of our kids that are involved in extracurricular activities in the evening, a lot of our, whether it's in building activities and clubs, or even if it's sports, a lot of those coaches or those advisors will find ways to feed those kids. I mean, we just find different ways, whether it's through, donations or I mean, I know a lot of our staff they'll go out of their own pocket and they'll buy pizzas or they'll buy this whatever for the kids because they care. And they want to make sure that the kids are eating and getting what they need. So, I mean, and that's those things that you have to do in a public school. You got to be there and help your kids as much as you can. It's not always about the reading and math. Sometimes it's just about the things to help them survive in life.
Because that's part of the educational process.
But it also, like I said, when I said earlier about it, it does show the kids that, hey, these people really do care, but they're not just sending me out there, knowing that I'm hungry or whatever. They are willing to help, and do things for us. So that helps, and that helps those kids. That gives that kid a reason to be there every day and come to school, because that's half the battle's getting them there. It's getting them to the building and getting them to school. And then once you get them there, then you figure out a way to help them learn.
So is that difficult sometimes to get them to go to?
Oh, it's a lot more difficult today than it was. I know, and I know we always say, well, back when we were in school, but it's different. It's totally different, and the reasons that kids will miss a day of school or for some reason not come to school, and you hear the excuses and the reasons. It's like, if I would even considered saying that, I would have got thrown out of the house to go to school. But it's just different, but these kids are going through different things. These families are going through different things. So a lot of the things that these families are dealing with are a lot harder than I ever had to deal with. And I was blessed. I didn't have to deal, with issues at home. I had both my parents. Both my parents worked. I didn't want for anything. So I was lucky, a lot luckier than a lot of these kids are. So so you got to understand that, so that you can't hold things against the kid, against the student, and at the end of the day, it's still about, okay, we're going to get you here. If you missed yesterday, well, we're going to get you here tomorrow. All right, we're going to get you here. We're going to help you make up your work. We're going to help you get what you missed, because you can't dwell on the negative. You can't dwell on, well, this kid never comes to school, blah, blah, blah. Well, what are we doing with him when he gets here? And that's the mindset that you got to have, because you're not helping the kid if you're just blowing them off. So.
Okay, let's talk about some other things. I want to now, of course, I understand that because most public schools are not funded the way they should be funded.
Yes.
And people don't understand how in some districts they get more money from the state than you may get, and how it costs to do it. Could you talk about that?
Well, I can talk about Steelton-Highspire. We are about $10 million underfunded. Okay, so I mean that's $10 million underfunded historically over several years. So that money also adds up year to year. So, but yeah, we're about $10 million underfunded. So we have been working with a deficit for the last several years, about a $2 million deficit, which basically means we're putting out more than we're getting in. And a lot of it has to do with charter schools, cyber charter schools. A lot of people don't realize when they see the commercials for cyber charter schools, they're not free. They're not tuition free. Your local school district pays that tuition. So when people see the commercials and they say, yeah, you can send your kid here, it's tuition free, it's not. Your tax dollars are paying for that. And those tax dollars, instead of going to your public school, get taken right off the top. We don't even see it. And it gets diverted to that charter school for every kid that we have in our district that's attending a cyber charter. So that's money that we never get. And it's so much for a regular ed student, and then it's more for a special education student. So that funding, the amount that we pay for cyber charter schools is basically our tax revenue that comes in, goes right to that. So we're basically working in a deficit right off the bat, and if it wasn't for then we get our state funding, which is, like I said, we're $10 million underfunded, so that's not nearly enough. But then between the state funding and then we get some federal grant money, but that's our lifeline, and it's tough.
How much do you pay on? How much do you pay out your budget for go off the top to go to charter schools about? You can just give a rough. I won't quote you.
I want to say don't quote me because I know, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But I want to say it's about 7 or 8 million.
7-8 million.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And and I'm not gonna I don't want to disparage cyber charter schools.
I'm not
because it's good for kids. Some kids that's a good thing for kids to have. Being in cyber, the public school isn't for everyone. But the way it's funded really needs to be taken a look at because it's hurting, especially urban schools. It's hurting us financially that we can't do things for our students that are attending our school that want to be at our school, and it's unfair. Now the state, I give the governor credit, and the House they're looking at. They've come up with a way that hasn't passed yet, but at least they have it out that the funding is going to increase, and they have a plan to try to get our funding where it needs to be over the next several years. But I always say that I'll believe it. One, I'll believe it when it passes, and I'll believe it when we get the first check.
Well, the government, and the courts already agreed
the courts
agreed
did
that
it.
that the schools have been underfunded.
Tremendously.
I mean, tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no question that some people cannot be in a building. They need to be other places.
Yeah, like I said, I have no problem with cyber charter schools, and I think there's a place for them. So it's not that as much as it's just how they're funded, And I think that's the thing that that is an issue, and they've talked about that. Now finally talking about how to restructure how they fund that, and if that happens, that'll also be a positive for us as well. Because at the end of the day, what we talk about, at our schools, that we want our kids to have access to the same things that kids that go to a wealthy suburban school has. We want our kids to be able to choose and have access to different types of elective courses that they have at those schools that we right now can't do because we don't have the funding to have the staff to teach it. So we want to be able to provide that for our kids, and that's the only, we just want it to be fair. Like it shouldn't. What a kid has access to shouldn't be determined by their zip code and where they live, and that's how we look at it. And because that's just not fair. Because it's not the kid's fault where they live at. So for them to be able to, like our school, or you can go to a Cumberland Valley or a Hershey or somewhere, and they got a pool, they got this, they got that, and then you come to our school, and we barely have electives for our kids to take because we just don't have the funding. And it's just like we have all these kids, all these school districts that built brand new, spanking new buildings. They look all beautiful and everything, and we're sitting in a building that opened in 1958 at our high school, and we know we need a new building. We desperately need a new building, but we can't do it. We just don't have the finances to do it.
The finances and the tax base.
Right.
Because your tax base is
we can't tax our way out of it, and that's what we tried to. We've been talking with the state about, and they've been great about it, and they understand. Like we can't. Our community isn't. We just can't tax our way out, and we're landlocked, so we can't. It's not like we can expand and build more things and build a warehouse here and a warehouse there and do. We just don't have the space, so. We're a lot different than our neighbors. Like most of our neighbors, you look at our neighbors, we're surrounded by suburban, expanding districts between Central Dauphin, and Middletown, and then like Harrisburg is not so much expanding, but they're the capital city. They get funded. They're going to get funding. So you got Harrisburg. So we're surrounded by all of our neighbors are bigger school districts, that have the ability to raise funds. We can't do it. We don't have that ability, so we're at a disadvantage when it comes to that. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just the way our geography is. So it's like it's nobody to blame about it. There's nobody you can't say it's this fault or that fault. It's just the way it is. And so we try to work with it. But if we always talk about it, if we ever are able to get funded the way we should, it'll be a game changer. Because we know what we need. Like we know the supports our kids need. We know definitely we know we need different staff members for support at our school that to do things, but we don't have the money to do it. Once we have that and that happens, it's going to be a game changer.
So you need As earlier as you said, I agree with you that we need to tell a better story. Like you said, people see sports, but they don't see the academics and the people that we send out in the community. So one of the things I think you're saying, maybe we need to do a story on that and tell the story, but at the same time, I think sometimes our culture, and I get upset about it, even though I was an athlete, I think sometimes the culture is, it seems like we're raw for sports, and that kid is the smartest thing, and is probably going to be a neurosurgeon, either gets disrespected or not looked at. So how do you think that we need to be, all schools, we need to do a better job of encouraging? Because I know for a fact, sometimes kids get bullied because they're smart.
I think you gotta be that way in your schools. You have to promote it within your school. Like you gotta put it out there and congratulating kids for doing well. Like I give our principals credit. They started a thing where they put out a video of all the kids who made the honor roll, and it was like amazing how many kids were like, well, I want to be in that video. I want to be in that video. Well, you got to make the honor roll, and that promoted doing well. And then the next time they did it, there was more kids. And I think that was one of the smartest things to do, because it promoted doing well in a way that kids wanted to be a part of it. And it wasn't just, oh yeah, so and so made the honor rolls. But now it was on YouTube, it was on Facebook, it was everywhere, and people were sharing it. And because now you're promoting that positivity. And I think you got to get kids excited about wanting to do well. And I think, so now we try to do that all the time. If we have a kid who the NAACP had the AXO competition, and we actually found out about it late, but we were able to get a couple kids, we had several kids involved, but we had 2 kids get silver medals. It was like they really had 2 weeks to prepare. Like, what awesome that is! They didn't have the preparation time as the other kids, and were able to do that. So we were putting that out on our web page, on Facebook, we do a monthly newsletter, putting in things like that's what we want to put out there. These kids, look at what these kids are doing. We had a young lady who won the financial literacy at the Capitol, at the state, through Harrisburg University. Put that out there. Make sure everyone knows what these kids are doing. Like you said, it's not just the football. It's great, yeah. I mean, trust me, I coach football, played football, was AD. I love promoting our football team, our sports teams when they do well, but it just can't be that. It has to be these other kids just as much. Put them out there just as much, because they deserve it too. They're working hard. And when other kids see that, well, I can do that. I might not be able to run, a 4.5 but I can study, and maybe I can win that award and do that. And that's what you got to put out there. And it's just about promoting positivity.
And I agree. I mean, even though you guys participate in the Harrisburg Rotary, and they bring your students on, they give an award for the teacher of the quarter, and those things are very important. And one of the things I realized is that when it first came up about Steelton being a part of Harrisburg Rotary, because Steelton don't have a Rotary, and I said, well, it's the same kids, regardless what people think, whether they want to believe it. Harrisburg, Steelton, Susquehanna Township, them kids go back and forth because they have to go where their living arrangements may be. And because they're living arrangements, so they need to be exposed, as you said. And I think that we need to, the community itself needs to expose all of these kids, because you never know. Because you have some kids, they come to, some of them will come from, say, Middletown, they'll come to Steelton. Some kids from Steelton will go to Middletown, or they'll go to Susquehanna Township, or Central Dauphin East and stuff. So I think that if we develop a culture of education and the importance of education, no matter where you go, because we want our kids to do well. I mean, I understand. Somebody that said to me, yes, they want the kid lived in one of the urban schools and they had to go to a school out. They didn't want to go because they didn't think they were prepared enough. They didn't think they were at the level that all the kids were. So they already went in inferior. And so, as you say, we have to figure out a way to encourage people. Time has run really fast. I asked some other questions for you, but I didn't get to them. But I'm going to have you do this. In the next 3 minutes, I'd like for you to tell the audience what you think, where we are educational-wise, and what we should do.
I think right now, generally, I think, like I've said before, we're in a stage in education, and I can only speak for what I know, which is Pennsylvania.
Sure.
That we're in an unfair stage of education. I think we have a lot of schools that have an unfair situation because of funding. Just like I said, in Pennsylvania, schools are funded based on your zip code. It's all local tax money. So the majority of it is local tax money. So you're kind of stuck at that your access to things are literally based on where you live at. And I truly think that's unfair. I do think we're heading in a better direction since the court case, where the judge ruled that the funding formula was wrong and not correct. So I think if we can get to where we need to be, I think you'll see a big shift in education. I think you'll see a lot more access for a lot more kids, and I think you'll see, especially the rural and urban school districts, like a Still High or like where you're at, where you're from. I think you'll see those schools do a lot better because those kids are going to have a lot better access and support. Number one thing being the support. That you're going to see the achievement gap close. I really believe that. Because like I said, I know years ago when we had got some extra funding and we were able to hire a reading coach, a math coach, and all that type of stuff. You saw things get better, but then unfortunately the funding went away, and those positions went away, and things kind of leveled off. So I think, like I said, we know what works, and just having the ability to have that is going to be a game changer. So I think hopefully within the next 2 to 3 years, you'll start to see that change if what they're proposing for funding is able to pass.
Based on your career, do you believe all kids can learn?
Oh yeah, I think every kid can learn. It's just to the level of where you got to meet them where they're at. So you got to see where they're at and then try to get them to a better place. Not every kid is going to be able to do the exact same thing, just based on ability, just based on whatever it could be with that kid. But I think every kid has the ability to learn and get better. So it's like taking a kid. If you have 2 kindergarten kids, and one kid comes in and this kid's already reading, already knows numbers, but you have a kid who comes in and doesn't know anything. They can both learn, but they're going to learn at different paces. So you got to find out where that kid is and meet him where they're at, and then get him where they need to be. And I think sometimes in today's education, we have a tendency to try to meet all kids at one spot, and they're not all there. And so I think that's the most important thing is finding out where the kid is, and then helping them learn from there. And that kid may be, like I said, in kindergarten, and he goes into 1st grade. Well, he may not be on the 1st grade reading level yet, but he's a lot better than he was when he came into kindergarten. Because when he came into kindergarten, he didn't know anything. But now it's every year trying to catch him up a little bit as we can. So.
Well, we will leave you on that. Basically, all kids can learn. And I'm glad that you came on today, and I want to thank you for sharing your story about Still High. But I want people to understand there's a lot of Still Highs out there.
Yes, there is.
And people don't understand that or know that.
Yes.
But the most important thing is young people are our future leaders, and we need to do everything we can to make them successful in life. So thank you.
Well, my pleasure.
Thank you for joining the Richard Utley Show on The Voice 17104. We will be here on The Voice 17104 every first and third Tuesday from 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Once again,
People
thanks
texting
for
me.
viewing. Remember to visit us on Facebook at Richard
they've been
Utley,
texting about
and
you,
we
buddy.
welcome your questions and or
They've
comments.
been texted.
You're listening to